The committee in whole is back from recess. So we left off with Vice Speaker Nelson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So just before we went into recess to reset the live feed, we were discussing the U17 Oceania Championship in 2017. And so really the importance is to see the economic impact study. And so EJ, can you please explain to us, all of my colleagues, you have a copy on your desk now. Can you please explain to us the impact that Guam saw during this tournament?
Yes, we not only had obviously the teams fund their trip to Guam for the competition. This tournament was actually both men and women, boys and girls, at the age of under 17. But also there was quite a bit of fans that came along with them. That's what's great about youth sports, especially. I'm sure the fans are related to them mostly, and they obviously were renting cars and booking hotels. This report was actually produced by FIBA, who worked alongside our confederation to organize the event. They collected data in terms of participation, and then about a month after the games sent us some statistics, and I believe they do this regularly throughout events that they hold internationally. So I'm sure they use some economic numbers to project that the spend on Guam was over $1.3 million from athletes, officials, and another $1.3 million in visitors to the island during that time. And I think they also tracked some of the audience members on YouTube watching the live stream at 400,000 and social media impressions at almost 4 million, which again, some of the marketing gurus out there or at the Visitors Bureau will look at those numbers and put some dollar signs to what it takes to get those kind of exposures. So that's, I think, the summary of some of the economic impacts of this tournament.
Thank you. So, Madam Chair, just to reiterate, the return on investment, right? And this is before we're even looking at fixing the University of Guam gym, which, by the way, all of the University of Guam students can utilize, and even the local populace can utilize, because of the work of the Guam Basketball Federation. Is it Federation or Confederation?
Confederation.
Confederation.
C,
okay. Because of the work of the Guam Basketball Confederation, we saw in a short time over $2 million that was spent on this island. We saw social media impressions that represented Guam at close to 4 million in social media accounts, which means this is globally, which is a great booster if one of our economic pillars are tourism. And then we also saw an enormous amount of live streaming. And so I really feel that this is a positive move forward. I really feel this is a good investment. These are players that were born on Guam that have, our culture, our island culture. And so I believe that, this is something that will really show the spirit that we have, the representation that the island has globally around the world. So thank you, EJ. Thank you to the partners at University of Guam. And thank you, Gita and OFB. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. So this will be the second round of questioning. Senator Therese Terlahi, do you have a question for the panel?
Yeah, first round.
I'm
yes,
sorry,
I
this
do,
is the first
Madam
round.
Chair. Are you saying you want to go before me? Are you trying to go before me?
Okay, so we still are resuming the first round. So Senator Therese Terlahi, do you have any questions for the panel?
Yes, I wanted to ask Gita if, I know, so the government of Guam has authorized tax credits for contributions for other renovations or other sports facility renovations, including the Tejan Gym, as we talked about, which is probably the most recent, 2014 $2.5 million. They did it for UOG, $1 million back in 2004, and they authorized it for the Guam Department of Education, $1 million in 2004. Are you aware if the $1 million for the Department of Education was authorized the full extent?
The tax credit programs for the Guam Department of Education sports facilities, I believe is what you're referring to,
Yes.
as well as the University of Guam sports facilities. Those are considered inactive tax credit programs. Those were 1 million each, and I believe that those have not been drawn down on.
They've not been what?
They have not been drawn down on, so those are still
They were not
outstanding. Yeah.
back then. I see. I'm also wondering about the University of Guam. If the university, did we ever decide on the amount that the Department of Parks and Recreation was contributing to the improvements at the University of Guam? Was there an amount?
We've never seen the amount. We just know the scope of the work.
What we can do is we can get the purchase order that has been done. That's what we've been waiting for and asking, but the work is in progress, so we know the PO has to be done. When we get a copy of that, we can give you who the vendor is as well as the amount that was approved for it.
All right, but what is the arrangement with the University of Guam in those cases? I guess I'm curious why the University of Guam, if this is for their facility, why you are not the ones that is asking for the tax credit and managing the improvements that are going to your facility and managing that together with your planned improvements for that facility and the endowment fund's plans for that facility.
The tax credit was a great idea, and they took the initiative to do that. The upgrades and the facility renovations have always been on our list, but within our normal budget process, we have not been able to get it funded. So this kind of accelerates actually 3 major areas of shortfalls that we have done on the preventive maintenance side and the upgrade to like the lighting and the flooring, which actually now needs replacement. That's why when he says they're just doing minor repairs, it has already been refurbished about 4 times, and that's about the life cycle for that type of a flooring that we have. So we're at the point now where it does need to actually be replaced. And so with their assistance, they've been helping us to do that. On the other side with the endowment, because I'm just new to this position for the facilities management, I have not had an opportunity to pursue that. All I know is that on the operational side, we just don't have the funding to be able to do a lot of it, but we have done some things to it.
I guess I'm just curious if it's necessary improvements to the University of Guam, why it hasn't been planned prior to this, or, you know, I asked you during the break, there was, I think, a donation to the university's endowment foundation that resulted in the field house being named the Calvo Field House, and I was wondering if that was, you know, what I guess accommodations or improvements were made with that money that was made pursuant to that donation.
Right, and the improvement that I'm aware of when I was the chief of staff at that level, not with endowment, they enclosed the whole left wing that used to be open to the air. That's why our weight room and everything that goes all the way around the corner has been enclosed and air conditioned to protect the environment there, as well as having more better environment while people work out in that area. The right side has not been done yet, and so if you want to picture the improvement, the right side was like the left side as you enter the main entrance.
Sure, yeah.
What I can do for you is I can get with endowment to find out the actual donation amount, what it may be fenced funding for, and what may other projects have been done associated with that gift.
Thank you. Mr. Hernandez, again, back to Guido. What is the difference between funding this? I mean, the total's about $400,000. Funding this with an outright appropriation versus tax credits. And so we got a fiscal note from BBMR that points out that using a tax credit prioritizes this above every other appropriation that we've made as debt, or you know, takes it off the top, I guess. It takes it off the revenue. And what other impacts do you foresee from using that mechanism versus an outright appropriation of either excess funds or transfer of funds, especially if, for example, to Parks and Rec?
Yeah, I have not reviewed that fiscal note from BBMR, but I guess if you want me to interpret what they mean, I think what they might be trying to say, based on what you mentioned, is that the tax credit obviously is processed prior and impacts the revenues that would have been recorded by the government of Guam, then that would have been appropriated by this body. So it would have occurred prior to your being able to appropriate it. And I think that's probably what the fiscal note is attempting to state. In terms of impact, I guess it's not something that Gita can answer, but I guess the question would be, if the tax credit wasn't provided, would that not or induce the activity that would have happened if you did authorize a tax credit? So, but in terms of processing these tax credits, Gita's role is really just to whatever the body, this body authorizes, we process it as the law states and as our rules and regulations provide for.
Right, but I'm asking you as the financial advisors of the government of Guam, just the impacts, for example, if it was an outright appropriation to University of Guam for these listed improvements, or to the Department of Parks and Recreation for these improvements, you know, they'd have to go through the procurement law, that type of thing. I don't know whether it would be more efficient, less costly is what I'm really aiming at, or whether you have some kind of control on the tax credits as to the cost. Because I know we're paying for costs and services, and if you think that has an impact, direct appropriation to an agency to make these types of repairs versus tax credits, particularly to nonprofits, and not saying anything about this one nonprofit, because I know we've been doing this in other occasions, and I just want to know from our experience, have we gained any insight?
We haven't done an analysis on the efficiency between procuring for services and equipment and construction related services between the procurement process of the government of Guam versus these tax credit programs. But within our rules and regulations, there is a requirement for competitive procurement of supplies, materials, and any related construction services. And you know, how that specifically states in our rules and regs, it requires 3 quotes and things like that. But in terms of efficiency, between whether you were to appropriate, then that would go through the procurement process through the government of Guam. I don't have any data specific to comparing the efficiency of procuring specific equipment versus in the government versus how a nonprofit would have done it. But we have our rules and regulations that promote competitive procurement of all these services and equipment.
All right, it's just because the amount it's either 200,000 or 400,000 as we're looking at things going around here. So 200,000 for improvements to the University of Guam's field house, plus 200,000 for travel of the team. And I wanted to clarify with the Confederation, the travel is for your team. That's correct?
Correct, our entire group.
So those are not necessarily like hosting costs. Those are team improvement, development costs.
Correct.
Qualifying costs. And the upgrades to the gym that we've received, it shows that the investments required by FIBA in order to host are approximately 195,000, and but the total enhancements that you would like are 240,000. Right. So what are the these enhancements also, I mean, they show the facility is going to be improved, but you talked about hosting costs. I don't see any of those itemized here. Is that you're going to cover those yourself? For example, I think the treasurer talked about providing rooms for those who come. Is that
No.
a requirement or not?
No.
Okay.
The visiting countries, we assist in kind of with direction and guidance, but they currently have booked their own rooms. I think there's probably 25 rooms booked, and that's at their cost at this point for this first game. Also, we do have some operational costs, quite a bit, and that's a good point because there is an admissions element in terms of trying to generate revenue, concessions of the game. These are the operations of any event, but there's also expenses along with it. We have not only the safety concerns, the barricades, the security, but also production costs, because one of the big requirements is a certain type of scoreboard that does not exist on Guam. So we are utilizing rental of screens to be able to host the game, and that costs money. And there are also certain officials and representatives of FIBA that as the host country, we are required to provide accommodations and ground transportation for them. So those are some of the hosting costs, but they're not here because they're part of the event operating budget, which also has revenue to hopefully at least cover that.
Is there a memorandum of understanding with the University of Guam in regards to the operation of this event or future use by the Confederation of the Gym? What is your agreement with them?
Yes, there is a memo of understanding with the Guam Federation basketball as well as with the Gov Guam Parks and Rec Department of use of their funds to renovate the arena.
Can you elaborate on what the agreement is, for example, with the Confederation of the basketball? Do they get all the profits from the concessions? Are you getting any of it or things like that?
The actual FIBA events know that we're basically saying because you're helping us out improving the facility that we'll let you in for free and you have full run of the facility. But we do profit from other events that we will host that we do get the gates and concessions. So it will improve our funding as well from other events.
All right, and you have full use of the improvements that are going to be made?
Yeah, the basketball goals are basically going to stay at UOG. The improvements, everything will be used by the students. We host basketball leagues during the year, so folks from the community will be able to use it. And then we would also like to bring in some more international. I've heard in the past that they've had friendlies with colleges from the Philippines and things like that, and we would like to bring that back as well. And with having a better facility will attract more teams.
Okay, thank you. And do the do those who donate to the Confederation, for example, the Bank of Guam, they donated $30,000. Is that part of the tax credit program?
No, it is our ambition to try to secure more corporate sponsorship or community sponsorship. So that contribution, of course, like any other sponsorship, comes with exposure that we will try to provide them with not only uniforms, but also maybe some signage at the game and such as that. But so their funding will help us operate, and we will try to give them also the return that they're looking for as sponsors. Not that that's all they're after. I'm sure they just want to give us support as well.
Help, yes.
But that's what that deal is.
Yes. Well, I know you guys have great records, so you've been able to secure sponsors that are prestigious, and congratulations on your record, on your hard work, and on bringing this very prestigious event to Guam. I wish that the people of Guam, if we're going to make this investment, are also going to be, too bad we can't put people of Guam basketball team, but I'm just kidding. I know that that won't fit on your jersey, but it is a significantly larger amount. You know, the tax credits that the people are giving up for this purpose. Is the Confederation receiving any money from the Guam National Olympic Committee? Are they involved in this at all?
Currently for this, no.
What about the Guam Visitors Bureau? Do they plan to participate for FIBA? I've asked, but I haven't received a response.
Yes. Almost every year for the last few years, there's an ambassador program that we've applied for and received some support from the Visitors Bureau. We're very thankful for. I don't think it's classified as a sponsorship, more so a grant.
Yes.
And for sports and cultural ambassadors, and so we were approved for that again in 2020, and we're last year, so we're appreciative of that support, and that usually goes to travel and expenses tied to off-island trips.
Do you know the amount?
It's between 5,000 and 10,000, so I believe it.
Right.
We try to apply for the 10,000 grant usually.
All right, and then sorry, back to GITA again. Did the GITA board recently took it upon itself to vote to extend a tax credit program for the hotels? And has the GITA board had any action or consideration of this tax credit program, or this proposed program?
I think the tax incentive program you might be referring to is the qualifying certificate program that the board.
Yes.
Yeah, they recently extended the opening date for one of our QC holders, which is Tsubaki Tower, which was required to be completed by March 28th of next month, and or 28th of next month, and so they extended that for 90 days. As it relates to this tax credit program, the board has not discussed this at the board level.
What about in the employee level or the agency level? Is there any discussion as to predictions of the impact, that would give us confidence that we are looking at a good investment, that type of analysis?
I think we've internally discussed the cost to GITA's operations, but the cost to GITA's operations for all tax credit programs that we administer is really dependent upon the number of tax credit memos that we receive, or tax credit requests that we receive. And from our internal discussions on the impact to GITA, it's about 20 man hours for processing all tax credit programs per week. And I don't have a dollar figure for that, but I think you're asking a little bit more broader. We have not discussed internally the impact. Yeah.
All right. The potential revenue for Guam.
Yeah, we have not discussed that
All right.
internally.
All right, and then I have one technical question for you. That's on page 3 of the bill. It says it shall be entitled to credit of business privilege taxes that are not already pledged for any purpose by Guam law. The part there that are not already pledged.
I think with all the tax credit programs, since the business privilege tax bonds have been floated back in 2012, the pledge, I believe that's being referred to here, is the pledge against business privilege tax related to the bonds that were issued against that. And so I believe this program follows similar language of other previously authorized programs like the Harmon Industrial Park Association, or Harmon Industrial Park road construction, and the Tizen Gym.
So what does that mean in practical terms? If a company donates $50,000 of equipment, is that reduced by the amount pledged? Or do they get a $50,000 tax credit?
Yeah, so GITA's role in the whole process is to just authorize based on what the rules and the law says. And so we would provide a tax credit certificate to the business owner that donated and was authorized to receive that tax credit, and they would take that to the Department of Revenue and Taxation, and that department would process that tax credit.
For the, what amount? The $50,000?
For whatever, for the amount in the tax credit memo that we authorize for them.
And what is the impact of that when you calculate, I guess, what's pledged to the bond? Is any part of that we are reimbursing?
I'm not sure exactly how RevTax actually processes that, and it's been well documented in some public auditor or OPA audits that there are some issues in reconciling because Department of Revenue and Taxation, as I understand it, cannot provide us tax information of any individual taxpayers. So what we process is we keep track of on GITA's end, and we assume that happens at the same level at DRT.
All right, and then specifically back to the projects, so the flooring is the bulk of it, $140,000, and you've explained that that's going to be done as soon as you're done with the February competition. The lighting is not very small, $10,000 for the lighting. These are required by FIBA. $45,000 for the basketball goals, again required by FIBA. So these other items, they don't total too much. I mean, if you look at them separately, cosmetic repairs and enhancements, laptop computers, printer, ice machine, official tables, and new chairs, $5,000. And then there's a contingency for $10,000, which I think they talked about earlier. But yeah, it's really, I guess I'm very curious whether the endowment fund had any plans to cover these, and then, prior to any of this. And I'm looking forward to that information. So if I can just verify. The T's and tax credits still pending 2 more years or 3 more years. There's 3 more years left and $95,000 for this year. But I know that you described also that the facility's beautiful at this point. Is it necessary to continue the T-ZIN for $250,000 a year, or could we, transfer that and then it would be a wash to the government to?
Yes, I would highly encourage the additional tax credits to remain with T-ZIN. We have plans for that facility. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do everything all at once because we're subject to $250,000 a year. Excuse me. And you can only do so much. The floor costs X amount of dollars, equipment. One of our next big expenses that we weren't able to do this year was to buy bleachers. We're starting to host a lot more games in our gym, and we want places for our fans to sit and watch. We also want to expand. T-ZIN's a very big facility. We've only probably done a third, maybe a half of the facility. So we're looking to spend the rest of that funds to expand to fully use the whole facility that's been given to us, as well as expand to the exterior of the facility. So we do have plans for that, and I would hope to still count on that to complete our mission to fully rehabilitate that facility.
Can I add to that? Because just to talk about the T-ZIN facility, I mean, this is Guam basketball is grateful that we have a home, but it's a management agreement, really, MOU with a property that I believe is under the DPR assets, just like the entire T-ZIN sports complex. And so we have a home. We have support from the government to really enhance that home, but it's a government facility. It's a community facility. It's not ours. We're using it for the benefit of the community and for the national program, of course. But like Marie was saying, about half of it is complete. If you guys remember ever being there, there's huge rooms in the back we have not touched, other than just making sure that rainwater isn't coming in, trying to get some of the rodents out and basically keep them out of the building. the jungle grows up around the building, and our goals in the overall plan, as you're asking, is it enough? It's not even enough to pave additional parking. I'm excited to see that over at the football field side and some of the areas that some of the jungle has been cleared, I think by the mayor or DPR. And so the sports complex overall has great potential, and we hope to be a big part of that enhancement in the future. But it's shocking how expensive a parking lot is. As we saw proposals come in, and we have to prioritize $250,000 a year. We have kids playing, we have kids training, but now we would love to have a physical therapy room. We'd love to have a proper weight room, and then eventually security fencing and paved parking for people that can come to the facility. That will cost a lot of money. So those are some of the plans to kind of summarize that if we did not have that, I mean, and it's the community's facility, I'd hate to see that plan get derailed, as we hope to finish it and have more and more activity. Facilities dictate activities, and that's what the island needs, I think, in terms of having kids come to a safe place and not only stay out of trouble, but learn the game of basketball, hopefully, and further their talents to potentially represent Guam as well. So that's our mission with this facility and this tax credit really going where it needs to go. And so far it's been successful, so I hope we can continue that.
Okay, Senator Terlahi, yeah, we can move on to the next member.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Senator Kelly Marsh-Taitano.
Sidus Maasi, Madam Chair. Well, I have a few questions. So I just want to start off by saying, as a social scientist, I definitely know the connection between needing programs that provide that pride in self and place in programs that inspire healthy paths to be chosen. I think these are really important for us to be looking at this particular time, because we're facing some pretty heavy crises. And I think it's important for people to look at this holistically and see that we have to give inspiration for our community. We have to give those senses of pride. And of course, it still has to be balanced out with all of our other concerns. But it serves such a valuable role for our youth and others on island. And so I just wanted to start off with that. Some of these get to the very beginning of some of the questions or comments. So there was a comment made that at the UOG Fieldhouse gym, that those are the original floors. And since UOG is here, are they indeed the original floors, or has there been, I believe there's been some work done on them, but maybe it's just been rehabilitation of them or refurbishing?
Yeah, that is the original floor. It has been renovated a few times, but it is the original floor. It's made out of maple, and it's kind of lived its life.
Okay, Malik. And it's good to know that they last a long while, because part of what we're looking at here is the length of the investment. It was very good to hear about the new software that's going to be helping with maintenance and make sure that we're staying on top of this. What is the estimate from UOG on how long these improvements to the flooring and the other parts that are going to be improved, what is the estimate to how long these are going to serve the community?
Well, a good floor can last 20 to 30 years if it's taken care of correctly. The basketball goals there, I've been told, I think EJ has told me that he actually played on the same basketball goals in high school. So the goals have lasted 20 some odd years or more. So if we take care of everything, and we will try our best to take care of everything, then we hope we will get 20 plus years out of most of the improvements. If FIBA changes the rules on us, we may have to change it, but the plan will be to keep everything in very good shape as we go on.
Situus Masi. And I think that's important to hear, that when we're talking about these investments, they have the potential to last 20 or more years. So my statement is don't let FIBA change the rules on us now that we've invested in this direction. There were a couple of things, and maybe I missed it, so please forgive me if I missed it somehow, but in the travel costs, when I was looking at the home games, you mentioned that there are 3 home games, but 2 are in November, and I'm thinking that that's why some of the home game costs are different for the 2 November games. Can you explain that so I can understand the 2 home games that seem to be in November?
Yeah, even when we have a home game, we have players, especially February and November aren't summer months, so we have players that will be abroad, and if we're asking them, hey, to represent Guam, of course, we'd like to, as a program, say we will cover your cost of travel to come back to the island for the home game to represent Guam. And so even though we're playing at home, we still have some airfare costs. And then, of course, some accommodation costs just in terms of normal hosting. So there's some expenses there as well.
So I was looking at this in 2 ways. On one hand, it's only one time for those 2 home games that we need to get those 8 players back on island. So instead of it being 3 times that the cost of $22,000 is there, it's just a one-time cost for 2. So in that sense, we get kind of a 2 for 1. But on the other sense, maybe you could explain how this will still help us economically, because we will be having more than one team here, so that, again, maybe it boils down to more of a 2 for 1, that we're still going to have 2 teams coming. Can you explain or detail that?
They every team during a window, I think it was kind of talked about earlier, there's 2 games in every window. So when we host 2 games in a row, while we're playing the first game here, that the team that we will play in the second game is somewhere else playing abroad, or maybe they're home. And then the team we play has to leave, and that next team will come in. So now you're talking about doubling up the arrivals, doubling up the hotel stays, the night stays, the spend. You have new pockets coming in, new wallets coming in to therefore enjoy Guam. So it really will double it up. Obviously, I would also say for those sports fans, you get a double header, because now you have 2 games within a week. So it's pretty exciting. But those are all kind of the situation of having 2 games home in a row. And then I think it was also economics in mind when they scheduled us to go to New Zealand and Australia in one shot and not have to fly back and then do another trip down under later. So we're doing that road trip, you would say, to those countries in one shot, and I think that saves a little bit as well.
Situus Masi for that explanation, and then that also answered that they were going to be within a week of each other. And looking at some possible money generation from this, and I think you spoke to it a little bit, but I'm sorry that I was walking around. I wanted to check with others, and it seemed like there was still some gray areas there, so I wanted to ask it possibly even again. I'll start off, though, with possibilities for clinics. Now, it seems like there's going to be a lot of traveling. Maybe things will be rather short. With these visiting teams here, is there an opportunity to ask them to provide some clinics for our community that either is just something that benefits the community or something that might generate money?
Maybe not the teams per se, especially if, like I said, they're playing against us and then need to go to a next game immediately. But with the FIBA officials, now you have the governing body of basketball coming to Guam, and of course they bring their high-level officials, not only in the referees, but just in terms of event organizing, games management. Maybe I should ask Frank to comment on this, because he was actually educated by FIBA in a workshop about how much goes into an event like this, and they're going to be coming over to help with this.
Yes, I just wrote that down as great idea. we've got FIBA officials, referees, coaches, medical, even the facilities. There's going to be a facility certification person coming out here, signage. So why not? When you wrote, that was the first thing I don't know if you noticed, I opened my book and wrote, say, yeah, let's take advantage of that. So we'll have 3 professional basketball referees doing the game. We don't have anybody qualified on Guam to do that, but there's a team of 8 coming out. And then, why not? If Australia's coming over and they've got the medical staff, the sports medicine, and we've got a great team as well, I know they'll learn off of that as well. So that's a great idea.
Well, and that's good to hear that there are those possibilities to benefit our community as much as possible is really important. And I know basketball is pretty well regarded within the community, so any opportunity to continue to develop that is important. Also, so this is the part I wasn't sure that we had a lot of clarity on, and maybe we lost some information there, but for these games, is admission typically charged for entrance to these games?
Yes, it's quite normal. We also did a workshop as a hosting federation on how to host, and obviously they go through your expense budget first in terms of security, and we're very grateful we were able to recruit some volunteers to help with the staffing, ushers, and things like that. But there are a lot of other expenses that go into the game. And then on the next side, they look at revenue generation to help you defer your expenses. And you always try to work with sponsors first, and they obviously want to have the publicity at the game. But then also admissions and concessions is a factor. We try to be conservative in projections, and we hope, just for the sake of the experience, we hope the field house is sold out. But we try to be conservative and say if we generate some revenue from admissions, we can definitely not be underwater as a host event manager, basically. So that's how it usually works.
Oh, what are your estimates at this time as to how much a ticket might cost and how much might be generated?
Tickets are on sale for $20 currently at all Foodies locations island-wide. But what's exciting is that we are also reaching out to youth clubs, school clubs. We have a lot of, obviously, networks with coaches and parents that are around the sport. And for them, we're selling it at a discounted price of $15 because they're organizing their groups. We'd love for them to come out with their jerseys and sit together and just enjoy the experience. And with those groups, we're getting called every day, I'll take 20 tickets for my team. And so we expect, it's always easier to sell to a group. And so we're having some good feedback that they definitely see the value in paying admission to watch a pro level game and definitely be in a comfortable seat because I think the facility is definitely had improvements over the years. And one of the big ones that I'm glad is out of the way are those new bleachers that they put up in a couple of years ago. And the air-conditioned locker rooms. I remember probably like Senator Rigel, he mentioned playing in high school in UOG, and the locker rooms are sometimes, no, not to offend anyone, pretty bad. They're beautiful. They're well-maintained, and that's all been fairly new renovations, along with the bleachers. I think now it's time to take the entire facility to that next level. And so I think it's a great experience for the crowd and for the spectators.
So it was very good to hear about the ticket sales. Foodie locations got a shout out in a sense. And you said you had some conservative estimates. So what are you estimating at this point, I guess, in sale generation and then maybe after balancing out the costs?
I think we're hoping for at least 20,000 in admission sales. Obviously, it's at a different price for a $20 ticket versus $15 ticket. So if we do hit that mark, I think it's conservative that we should be able to fund the operation of the event. And in addition to some sponsorship support that we would like to allocate to certain expenses. We also have solicited in-kind sponsors, which I think is also important. They may not be writing a check, but they are providing a service, bus transportation for one of the things that we are required from the hotel to the venue for the visiting team. That is sponsored. We're thankful for it, but it's in kind. So the operations were able to break even at least.
That was all very helpful to hear. So, Sijus Masi, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Moment's recess.
We are back from recess. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is to Gita regarding tax credits. Does Gita currently have a program, do tax credits normally apply to transportation?
Currently, our tax credit programs are typically for construction services and equipment.
So should this bill pass, this will be the first time that tax credits will be given for transportation?
This would be the first time it would be for working capital purposes.
And regarding the question from one of the previous speakers about tax credits that haven't been drawn down, has there been an expiration of those tax credits, or is there an expiration date of those tax credits?
Yeah, Gita manages a number of tax credit programs. Some of them have an end date. Some of them are authorized until fully used. Some of them have caps per year. Some of them have overall caps for the entire project or program. So there's multiple types of tax credit programs that we administer. Yeah.
And regarding, this question, maybe for Gita too as well. For sports tourism, what was the normal practice in regards to tax credits for sports tourism?
I think I guess in general, sports tourism, as I might understand it to be, the tax credit programs that we have that might impact sports tourisms would be the soccer stadium facilities. Those were funded by a tax credit program for the construction of the facilities. But sports tourism in general, we don't have anything specific for that.
The other question, I don't know if Gita has done any analysis in regards to the impacts of sports tourism as far as stimulating the economy. But I do appreciate all the work that FIBA has done, Guam Basketball Confederation has done. I know it takes a lot of work to get an industry off the ground. And so just, looking ahead, if you think about success of this industry, what would be the best way, if we see this as an investment, right? We're seeing this as an investment in our community, in our facilities. So, sometimes it's hard to tell when an industry is going to take off, right? But when it does, is there a way that we can structure this agreement or this arrangement so that the money that we invested, there is a return on the investment in our schools, our hospital? Is there a way to ensure that, should this industry be successful, that we can actually see the benefits in our community in a more explicit way. I mean, maybe that's an overarching question, something that needs to be worked out, but do you know, in your experience, are there ways to kind of see that return on investment?
I guess calculating return on, if that question was for Gita, calculating a return on investment such as a tax credit program, that's something that we have, not that I'm aware of, that we've necessarily done. But if I understand the question correctly, or the comment about being able to direct the benefits to certain types of services, government services, such as something related to health or education, it's an invisible line between the tax credit program and the impact on tax revenues that you then could direct to a specific service. And it's kind of something that we at Gita have difficulties with in terms of tracking our progress on our goals and our mission to generate economic activity, because it's one of those things that's not as clear as visitor arrivals. Economic activity is a little bit not as organized as being able to determine data from visitor arrivals or visitor spend or hotel room rate, room occupancy, and things like that. So in terms of directing the economic activity generated from a program such as this to a specific service, I think it might be a little bit difficult.
Thank you. So this question's directed to maybe EJ. So what are the differences between having a tax deduction versus a tax credit?
It's okay, Marie, sorry, treasurer.
I guess I don't understand the question.
So I guess if we're going to subsidize this activity, if this is an investment, what was the reasoning behind, tax credits versus just getting the deduction for the infrastructure improvements or, transportation? I mean, what are the differences?
From the government? You mean an appropriation versus the allotting tax credits, or?
Yeah, I guess maybe from the business perspective, tax credit versus deduction, taking deductions.
I think it's the credits in place where there's a BPT obligation, and this allows an applicant to redirect the payment towards a specific item that's obviously been approved by Gita, and they hold it, make sure that everything's compliant, that the funds are going where they're supposed to go, and therefore they're giving a credit towards what they would have paid in BPT. That's our understanding. In terms of how this was identified, I think the discussions I was involved with is having to do with this potential economic stimulus as a sports tourism event, and therefore it making some sense to be a worthy investment because of the potential revenue enhancement it could bring in addition to exposure. So I think that's how it came about. But again, whether a direct appropriation or tax credit, it's an investment.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're in the second round of questioning. Senator Castro, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a follow-up questions on a couple of topics. I just also want to say that it's been a very healthy discussion on a broad range of issues from the credibility of the organization, so I'm going to follow up on that, and discussions on a return on investment. And then I think even one of my colleagues was sort of picking at what the socioeconomic impacts are upon the community beyond the numbers in terms of dollars and cents. There was some reference made to the Tizen facility, and again, this goes back to the issue of the credibility of the team that has worked on that project. I remember going back, way back in the NAS days, it seemed state-of-the-art at the time. Then, as I think Ms. Pelkey mentioned, it was dilapidated and abandoned. And then I had the privilege to take the tour at your request, your invitation, and several of us went. I think the speaker was there and some of my colleagues, and you guys really did an amazing job. I noticed, though, on the back side of the facility, Mr. Calvo or anybody on the panel, you were talking to us about the need to remove hazardous material like asbestos, et cetera, but couldn't move forward because, again, one of the panelists mentioned there was a cap at how much you can utilize per year. I know it's been asked two different times, and there may be two different answers, but if you could tell me from a percentage standpoint, how much more do you have to go to complete the Tizen rehabilitation of that gymnasium, and I guess even the exterior? You haven't even started on the exterior. So from a percentage perspective, because that discussion I'm sure will come up in terms of the remaining tax credits that have been authorized.
If 50% of the funds are exhausted, I think we've only maybe completed 40% of the work. There's more work to be done. We're realistic to the fact that we may exhaust the funds, and therefore some decisions need to be made. Obviously, thinking long term, what's best for the improvements there. We regularly speak with DPR as well, who has a stake in this, and actually also work closely with the Barrigada mayor, who's always cares about the area and has assisted with some bush cutting and things like that. So I think one of our priorities is securing the facility, perimeter fencing and some good parking facilities. That expense is quite large. If you asked us in 2014, 2015, we would have told you our wish list to have several outdoor courts where we can hold activities for hundreds of kids. It'd be a dream to see that happen, and I think the Soccer Federation has set a good example, excellent example of how they've been able to accomplish having an entire community come together over youth sports. It's still just one gym, and so are we able to do everything that we would have wished, Senator? Probably not, and most likely not. We've received some quotations about for parking and to finish the facility, and you're right. Most everyone knows in that area, the buildings were quite old, and a lot of the initial funds were required before we move forward. We needed EPA clearance to make sure that environmentally the building was sound. So a lot of money that we weren't initially expecting to spend, we had to. And but it's about doing it right and making sure that facility is there for the next generation.
And thank you. I just lay that foundation, Madam Chair, so I can come back to it in the context of UOG, though. So I also appreciate you having provided for me this U17 Oceania Championship, which my colleague, the Vice Speaker, had referenced, that we made copies from an email you sent to me today. But for the record, I've had this in our prior discussion when I went out and saw you folks. There are two figures here on the handout on page 2, 1.3 million and then 1.3 million. Just looking at those aggregate numbers, if you were to take 10%, maybe even half of that, let's assume that it's taxable income, whatever vendors may have benefited from these people's spending. I can already see that there's a certain percentage of those monies coming back into the economy directly, even by way of recovering these through taxes. So I think that's one metric that we can use looking down the line as we attempt to figure out how much is kind of coming into the economy, because it lends itself to a prior question. Now, with that said, That was just for the U17 2017 event. I know that I had a conversation with you this morning before 8, and you were sharing with me that there's a U17 2021, which may bring in even more money.
That tournament is actually for U15 this time.
Oh, sorry, U15, I stand
It's pretty
corrected.
exciting because that's the 2022 U15 tournament. It's the same region, but for a younger group of players. Those are young kids running around Guam that will be competing against at this level. So that's in 2022.
Got you, and thank you for clarifying. I'm running against my last minute and a half. I know we're trying to be regimented here so everyone has equal opportunity. So with that said, unlike those two events, I had a sidebar with you. Senator Rangel had asked, how you earned the right to qualify and participate. My question is a little more direct, and I think you answered it on the sidebar, but I'd like my colleagues to hear it. So what is the risk if you don't participate in these games that are held throughout Oceania? Do you then, is it right for me to conclude that you would then forfeit the opportunity to have them reciprocate? So if you don't reciprocate in kind, they don't participate back here at home, and we don't get to realize this in exponential numbers. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, that is very accurate. Matter of fact, if I say there are 3 zones in Oceania, and right now one of the federations are under, how do you say, suspension because they are not participating in Oceania. And because of that, they're not, they won't be invited to the Pacific Games. And so there's a lot of things by participating for not just the men's and the women's teams, but the youth. We have to involve the youth teams as part of that participation. And then if you continue to participate, then you'll be invited to these qualifiers. There's only one spot for Micronesia teams to play in the Pacific Games for basketball versus Polynesia and Melanesia. They're allotted 3 each, or 5, no, sorry, yeah, 3 each. And that's because in Micronesia, they don't always participate. And so if the other federations start to participate, then they might increase that allotment. And then in the games, if we don't participate in the qualifiers, then, they won't invite us back.
I got you. Thank you so much. Chair, I don't have questions as much as I do two closing statements, if I may. The first one is, I want to thank you for the update on the U15 2022 bid that you want to host, and for the additional nugget that you provided to me over the phone about New Zealand, just so it's real for many of us, has already booked 25 hotel rooms at the market rate, right? It's not discounted because it's peak season, as I understand it. Also, they've arranged for catering and busing, and this is for the tournament that's happening in just a few weeks away. So thank you for the update. I also want to comment on the fiscal note inquiry. I know that was an important consideration for one or more of our colleagues about how applying this tax credit may affect the prioritization of monies that could otherwise be allocated or appropriated by this body. But many of us have children in youth sports, and I think we can all appreciate that if a vendor was to come there directly with whatever materials you needed, whether it's oranges or an entire facility or bleachers or what have you, so long as we saw the direct benefit to that child or that organization or a group of people, that would benefit us in more ways than one. And I would prioritize that any day. And this would be my last statement. I know I said 2. This would be the last one. But I think it's important to note that none of you, per the committee report, none of you are being compensated. As board members, none of the staffers are being compensated. And you did tell me also, Mr. Calvo, that just for the Teason facility alone, you have hundreds of kids and families. You actually have 6-week workshops or academies that run at 4 different quarters. And so my point is that there's an entire infrastructure beneath this that's not captured in terms of in-kind contributions by way of labor and resources, material resources. And I want to close with that. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to go a couple minutes more. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the panel, and I have no other questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Any further questions? Senator Pito, Senator Muni-Borja, Senator Taitugui?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Pardon
You know-
me, Senator Chalahi.
It's been a long day, and you know, when you first asked me, Madam Chair, do I have any question, and I mentioned I don't have any question, and I appreciate some of the things that were mentioned here regarding, you know, the activities and all the things that you guys are doing for the good of our youth and our men in basketball. But I was just kind of just like blindsided on this one, because I had thought that this is, I would say, a tax credit bill. And we talk about budgets and things like that, because I wasn't sure. I always thought that it's a tax credit bill. It's not an appropriation bill. So, and let me just say that I do appreciate the things that you had mentioned, because you guys are doing a lot of things, not having the funds that you really need. But I think that maybe in time we can just address the needs of and go into a budget bill, so that we understand what you really need, how much money you really need, and for what activities that you do. So, like I said, I'm not even going to mention anything about budget, because I feel that this particular bill is not about budget. This is about tax credit. And I want to just say that, you know, when we go into tax credit, we need, and I fully support this bill. If it's tax credit, there's no question about it, because that's what you need. That's what's going to entice some of the people and some of the businesses and individuals to really support your program. And I just want to thank you all for giving us your insight in as far as what is happening, what you're doing. And I guess you're doing great. Mr. Calvo, thank you very much. And I give you all the credit for the things that you have done for the basketball team. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Chalahi. Senator Taitugui.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you so much for being here. There's no doubt that, you know, there's an economic benefit as well as a health benefit to encourage our community into a direction of exercise and camaraderie between other countries and getting together. There's no doubt about that. However, there is something that was stated. There was something stated about the budget bill, you know, or about budget. And, you know, when the ambassadorship program started up by then Senator Morrison, was appropriating $200,000 that year, and I believe the next following year they appropriated another $200,000, and this went to GVB for that ambassadorship program. I hope that my colleagues in this budget bill would make sure that $200,000 go to GVB for this ambassador program and help these athletes who want to participate. Unfortunately, it wasn't done in the FY 2020 budget. But, and I asked you earlier about going to GVB, seeking funding there. And I did check, and that amount in that account is almost zero. So, but it still doesn't stop you from going to GVB, continuing to ask them for money at all. It takes a board to get together and decide how much they want to contribute to this event. It is called sports tourism. So I hope that you guys will continue to do that and look for funding there as well. You mentioned in your statement during the public hearing, in the event that this doesn't happen. In fact, I asked the question, is not able to shoulder any of this cost, you know, will this still happen? And you said, quote, just taking an insert from there toward the end, that there was some confidence that you would get the support, whether from the government or from the private sector, and that we are working at all angles to make this happen. Now, I know that there is some talk about the 2.5 million that was given to the Guam Federation, Basketball Federation. And in the event that we were able to use tax credit for, especially for the University of Guam, to refurbish that, the flooring that's needed, the close to $250,000 needed to refurbish that in tax credit. But when it comes to the traveling, if there is no funding there other than utilizing the already tax credit that the Guam Basketball Federation has for the Tejan Gym, and if you can follow me just for a minute here, you have approximately 3 more years to go on, and you can't see that money right now. You can't use that on Tejan Gym right now, because it takes 3 more years for first to use the 250 for FY 2021, then 2022, then 2023. It's money that you're not going to be able to use anyways. But if we were to take the FY 21 funding and utilize that and give that to the Guam Federation, Basketball Federation, to utilize that for the travel expenses, and then later on in the budget, bring it back to the complete 3 more years of another $250,000, which will be in another 2 years. But you see what I'm saying? You're not able to see that money right now anyways. You talk about you don't want to jeopardize the furbishing of the Tejan Gym. And by the way, I hope in your MOU between the University of Guam and the Guam Federation that you incorporate that you'll be able to utilize UOG Gym when you have big events for the Guam Federation, just for the local community. So I hope you incorporate that in your MOU between UOG, okay? So that you have some ability to use it, because I know you're still strapped at Tejan, you know, for events not as big as this, but still big enough that you need a bigger facility. So like I said, you're not able to see that money anyways in 3 years. So if it boils down to EJ, that you're able to at least use next year's money for this tournament coming up, and I'm just talking about the travel expense, because I have no problem providing tax credits for the University of Guam, which is going to be used for like 20 years down the line for other events. Are you willing to accept that?
I mean, the legislature thought it was a good idea several years ago to appropriate those tax credits to a facility. The tax credits are are dedicated to the Tejan facility, not to Guam basketball. We're doing our best to manage the facility, but the thought that that money is for us, or going, as you were saying, going to Guam basketball, is going to a community facility. And if we continue to support that idea, I think we're trying to be as honest as possible when we say the work is not nearly done. If we feel like that is the best avenue to further delay completion of that facility, it comes with new risks. So I think that's the repercussion or the impact of that.
It's not a delay. It's not a delay, because right now you're utilizing the funding right now. Okay, the balance, I believe, is $92,000 left in that funding for FY 20.
Correct.
I'm talking about using for FY 21 for this year. And then, because you're not going to see that money, like I said. And then for 2022, it's there for the next year. And then 2023, and then we make you whole again. When we go into the budget hearing, you know, this year, which we definitely have not done our due diligence when it comes to supporting sports tourism, that we can make you whole again. But the thing is, you need this money now.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. You're not going to jeopardize it. You're still going to have it there, but it just gives the legislature enough time to budget it in the next budget for FY 2024. You see what I'm saying? You're not going to lose it.
I understand what you're saying. We're at the 11th hour, and you'd have to change the law that we have with Gita on the gym.
Right.
to make that happen.
And that can happen,
And the other thing, I mean, we've had a long-term, this has gone back for years since, the late Tony Thompson has had the vision of trying to reclaim this gym. And the use, it's not even 40% completed. To take that money away, we'd have to, the cost of construction is really expensive. So even that 750, I get what you're saying, trying to use it up now, but how do we get back that money for the facility unless we apply again for another tax credit
Actually,
to
you
compensate?
you would apply for another $250,000 tax credit, or actually, it would, if you only need $200,000 for the travel expenses, then you only be going for $200,000, which won't come until, FY 2024. If we go into the budget bill, right now we can make an amendment to this bill.
Yep.
And the amendment will be allowing you to utilize the TDN tax credit that you already currently have for this tournament. And then when we go into budget, we can make you whole again so that you have the full amount. You're still going to get your 2.5 for the TDN gym. But it's something that we can do now, be more financially responsible, and then find that additional money in the budget bill, whether it's through an appropriation, which would be actually nice, instead of a tax credit, and just give you guys, because we haven't been funding the sports tourism or the ambassadorship program for years. So this would be an opportunity. So my question again, now that
Madam
you
Chair?
understand,
Just for a point of personal privilege.
privilege
You're-
is, what did I offend you in any
recognized.
way?
No,
Because point of
I-
personal privilege is an
Ma-
offensive.
I'm addressing the chair.
You recognize Senator Sinaga.
Madam Chair, the only reason why I raised point of personal privilege, as the chair of appropriation, we can't commit to anything in budget until it reaches that point. We're only here to talk about the tax credit, and I think we need to just stick to that. I'm just concerned that we're committing to something that we can't even see right now.
Thank you, Senator. So I'll accept that.
Absolutely. And so my question again is to you, EJ, would you be willing to do that in the event there's no way to fund your travel?
I mean, we appreciate the support. That's really what we're coming here to tell our story, and provide input and feedback on our program and what opportunity is in front of us. I think that's something that the legislature should, come together on and agree. I don't think it's our choice. It's just a matter of we have this need. We feel like it's a great opportunity, and we appreciate the support and the thinking outside the box. But I just whatever the legislature feels will make this an efficient and effective investment. That would be satisfactory.
Okay, thank you, E.G. Just the last question. The money that you're going to be generating from ticket sales, concession stands, and other selling items during the tournaments that are held at UOG, how much of that,
Do you know how much money you're going to make from that?
Oh. How much we hope to make?
Yes, hope to make.
Yeah, I think we hope, we put a target, I know about $20,000 in admissions.
Okay.
Concessions are always hit and miss on the island, but we hope there's some profit margin there, because of course we have to purchase the items and sell them, but maybe a couple thousand more, so $20-some thousand. Expenses are slightly less, so we think that we have a conservative estimate to operate the event. If there is as a nonprofit running an event, if there's a profit margin we see from this operation, even better. We will help our program continue on, and we have junior national teams that will be traveling in December of 2020 to Papua New Guinea to compete. These are some of the things on our mind that we'd love to say that our events not only did all these other things, but they also turned a little profit instead of losing money. And therefore, we'd be able to help pay other expenses and help defer some fundraising.
Thank you so much. So
Thanks.
that's almost about $25,000 and
Hope
plus
so.
the 40,000. So I appreciate that. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Joseph Augustine, do you have any further questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask a very simple question because it was discussed about tax credit that was given to DOE and UOG in reference to the sports facility. If either one can answer it, I'd appreciate it. Were those tax credit for the purpose of elevating the sports facility to the international level? Yes or no? Maybe UOG can answer that first, and then Gita can answer that.
Well, I wasn't here at that time, but and that was about the time EOG dropped all athletics. So I'm not sure the exact, but it was not meant to go to international level. It was more of UOG intramurals, a UOG varsity team level, but it was not meant for international competition.
Point of information, Madam Chair. When I read the statute, it looked to me like it was because UOG had suffered a typhoon, and it was to bring the field house back to at least some kind of capacity for sports.
Just to add to that,
Ricky.
the University of Guam tax credit program that remains dormant currently is for outdoor multi-sport complex, and I'm not sure if it contemplated what you're saying, which is to ready the field house for international competition.
Senator, I can add to that.
Yes, Dave.
Because I was in transition when I was coming from my other career to the side of the government of Guam. Yes, in accordance with our fiscal master plan, there was a sports complex associated with the tax credit, but because of other priorities, that project was kind of put on hold because our focus now is labs and classrooms and expanding the student learning opportunities. So the plan is still there in our fiscal master plan, but you're right. There has been no further movement in accordance with the tax credit that it allow us not to move forward into a sports complex for the purposes of what Doug said. It was not for international competition.
Thank you. So maybe Gita can answer this. If it was raised to international level, and you know, we all got a copy of the U17 Oceania Championship, and I see that it made something like running costs about $2 million. Wouldn't it be a driving force to generate money by giving a tax credit of $400,000? And then anticipate a big windfall? I mean, I can see a windfall here. It's almost like what is happening in the soccer fields. You get a tax credit, people are there, and so forth. Maybe you can comment to that on the Gita side, because I know you're always looking at what is the windfall that the GovGuam will benefit.
Yeah, this report, the U17 Oceania Championship that EJ had mentioned, was prepared by FIBA. It's the first time I'm seeing it, but you know, based on the information, not having a knowledge of the assumptions and the data, where they got the data from, obviously with some of the key numbers noted here with athlete spend and visitor spend, there would be some economic activity generated in terms of what type of how that would impact tax revenues to the government of Guam. We'd have to look at that a little bit more. But I mean, I guess the assumption here is being that, you know, this tax credit program will induce some economic activity, which then should generate something. And I'm not sure. I guess it's not something that we can answer, Agita, if this wasn't provided, that if it wouldn't induce the same type of activity. But based on what we've heard today, that, you know, the offering of the tax credit would help the Guam Basketball Confederation have some, I guess, give and take, or they're able to participate more in an international level, and therefore reciprocation would be involved in there. And so if this tax credit program would offer that, and then obviously there would be some positive economic benefits. As to how much, that's something we'd have to take a look at a little bit further.
All right. But just looking at this, and maybe EJ, you folks can answer this. Let me go back a little bit. On the budget, you got 240 you're looking at for UOG, correct? UOG's upgrade from the sports level, regular sports, simple basketball games to international level. And maybe UG can also chime in on this. How much do you charge to rent the UG each event? What do you charge? And if it was an international level, would the charge increase because it's been upgraded?
Our athletic events vary, but usually for local Guam, it doesn't cost would cost like $1,000 to host an all-day basketball tournament or a volleyball tournament. But most of the time, we would rent it out for $400 to $500 if somebody was coming in and playing several games. It really would depend on the event coming in. Most of the time, like I said, if it's the Guam Basketball Federation, then we're probably just going to let them in and have control of the venue because it's a big event for the island, and we understand that. If it was an outside group, like if we have a concert, it's $10,000 to $12,000 to rent it. We got a song fest coming up for Academy, which would cost about $7,000. So it really varies on what the event is and what our amount of work is. But right now, we don't hardly charge more than $1,000 a day for any event. If it starts at 8 o'clock and goes to 10 o'clock at night, will be $1,000. If it goes to 8 o'clock to noon, then they probably get out of there $300 to $400 or something, depending on how many courts and stuff they're using.
So you're telling us tonight that if it was upgraded at an international level, all the lights, everything improved, you would not increase your charge? I know you charge DOE $5,000 a pop for all high schools that go up there to graduate. And it's a one-day event. You're not going to charge more. You get better lights, you get better air conditioning, everything is upgraded. You're going to leave that charge as it is? I mean, I'm just trying to understand that.
Well, there's a certain price point on this island that you reach that people aren't going to pay. So that's kind of about
understood
where we're at. And DOE now pays us in the next fiscal year for renting for the graduation. So it's a situation that we sometimes don't meet our budgets and stuff during the year because the price points reached a point that they have a hard time paying. And we're trying to price things fairly, but we're also trying quick. UOG Fieldhouse is an auxiliary. We are not part of the regular UOG budget. So we are funded by student fees, the Fieldhouse student fee, and by our rentals, and we have to rent $125,000 to $135,000 a year to break even, and we have to make about $150,000 to really kind of get into a profit. So we got to match that up with what we charge.
So with FIBA's involvement, you could actually benefit.
Yes.
Fully.
I'm hoping that we get other events. We host 4 high school championships, the 2 basketball and the 2 volleyball. Now we're going to be hosting the private school and the public school mutual championship. IIAG just called today, and they want their championship game the week before the national championship game. I'm going to assume the public schools will call at some point and want to have their championship game in there. So we hopefully will get more events that will generate more funds for us to meet that. But like I said, we have to fund ourselves, so our price point tends to be a little higher.
All right.
But I think we've kind of reached our price point. I've started charging folks an extra $125 for our event, but that's the only kind of increase we're having.
Understood. Okay. My next question is actually geared towards Mr. Calvo. They mentioned trying to use the credit from Tizen. I can tell you right now, Mr. Calvo, I can't even commit that the government will be able to give you another budget or give you another tax credit from what you got today. And like I think your treasurer mentioned, every time you try to budget something, you're just trying to make do with what you got. And I'm just curious to know, how far are you in the construction and upgrade based on the tax credit? And will the remaining 3 years or whatever number of years left can complete the upgrade that is needed?
We're talking a lot more about the TGen project. I wish I brought some of these details because there's a lot of things we could we inform DPR about, but there's some details. One of the other surprises, in addition to environmental, pretty massive environmental cleanup, when we took on this project, was the sewer system. Sewer system's in bad shape. The answer from the construction teams, the experts, was that it's not going to be cheap. We put in a system there that is doing the job, but as activity goes
EJ,
up,
basically, you can't afford in the TGen project for any deviation from what little you got left.
we won't be able to finish the project, and we'll come back and say we did our best. We feel we've worked with Gita and all the parties involved to really do a good job on a property for the community, but it won't finish. It won't complete. There's a lot more work to be done. You are correct. And we'd love to see it through as much as possible.
Now, as you're raising funds, because your budget states approximately $200,000 for travel, but if the UOG cost us a little bit more than the 240, because you know 240 and 200 is over the 400. That's all the bill asks.
Yeah.
So you do understand and you do anticipate that you're going to be short, and that's why you're trying to raise money. So if you are short because you're fixing the gym, you can cover that shortfall if you, because you won't have, obviously you're not going to have 200,000 for travel.
No.
We're already looking at I'm just looking at it, it's 160. It started at 200, but with the 240, it's 40,
Yeah.
drop back, 160. If you can raise money, if it costs more to UOG, then of course you continue to raise money because this is all the bill is calling for.
Yes.
So if it goes up at UOG, then so be it. But your travel, you would find a way to raise the money.
Yes. That's why we're prepared to not ask for more and make the best out of what resources we're given.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Rigel, any further questions for the panel?
No, I'd just like to note for the record that this committee of the whole has gone on for quite a while now, and it almost appears to me like this bill had a public hearing. This feels like a second public hearing on top of a second public hearing combined with an oversight hearing. I just want to reflect that for the record, that this bill had a public hearing already. In fact, this is not an appropriation bill. This bill wasn't even heard by the appropriation chair. So I just want that on the record. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rigel. Vice Speaker Nelson?
Madam Chair, just a point of inquiry. Has everyone had their second round?
We're ending.
Am I the last one?
No, actually, the Senator Therese Terlai and Senator Kelly Marsh are the last.
Okay. I'll hold my questions for later, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Terlahi?
I want to ask Gita, what is the fiscal impact of this bill to the government of Guam? Because everybody's saying it's not an appropriation bill as if it has no fiscal impact to the government of Guam. What is the fiscal impact to the government of Guam?
Yeah, I haven't looked at the fiscal note, but I assume in terms of just the amount, it would just be the $200,000 per year that the bill contemplates. As a impact,
400,000?
the 200,000 per year that the bill contemplates, yeah.
All right, but $400,000 total? Right. There's an amendment floating around that might change that to remove the 2 years and allow them to use it upfront as much as they want. So the potential impact, if that was the case, would be 400,000 in fiscal year 2020. The fiscal note that was prepared by BBMR says this bill will authorize the BPT tax credits for funds that are not already pledged for any purpose per Guam law. The amount of available tax credits shall not exceed 400. Let me skip that part. Absent any information from GIDA, the Bureau is unable to determine the true impact the government of Guam may face. However, the Bureau notes it is concerned that the use of tax credits will impact the government's ability to manage the finances of the government of Guam, as it will reduce the expected revenues due to the government. The filing of tax credits by the taxpayer will take priority over appropriations made in the annual budget process, which may impact government programs. So my estimate is that if the bill has a potential to decrease the FY 2020 adopted revenues by 400,000, or yeah, the gross receipts tax or business privilege tax by $400,000, then it would, is that, you know, if that comes out of fiscal year 2020, does that leave us with $400,000 short then in our appropriated revenues versus adopted revenues? And I wanted to ask OFB, did OFB include the revenues that people are projecting will come from this event in its adoption of revenues for fiscal year 2020?
The revenues that was budgeted in the FY 2020 are based on information that we have during the time when we that we estimated. However, the revenues that was estimated in the budget may also, you know, for us right now, it's currently too soon to say whether there's, you know, there's not enough money on the budget. Like I say, we can probably, it may go up, you know, during the fiscal year, as we only in the first quarter.
Right. So the theory is that the fiscal impact of the 400,000 might be lessened by increased revenue, by increased visitors to Guam, or increased economic activity during the time of the FIBA activity event.
Yes, but however, you need to look at the impact as far as the visitors that's coming in for this tournament may also increase, may offset that, you know, that 400,000, you know, on the bill, on the tax credit.
Right. That's what I'm saying. That's the theory, but that was not anticipated when we did the FY 2020 budget.
Yes, ma'am.
If there was an agency that needs to be offset by $400,000, is there any proposal by GIDA? You know, Madam Chair, when you had motioned for us to go into this committee of the whole, you were very specific in announcing that BBMR was going to be invited to be here. It's my understanding they haven't been invited yet, and I would like to ask them these types of questions, but otherwise, I'm looking to OFB and BBMR, but really it's OFB and GIDA, but it's really BBMR's analysis that is critical here, I think. In any regard, when they say it's going to impact the operations of the government based on appropriations, then it looks to me that, you know, no one's proposing which agency is going to be impacted by that. Is any of you aware of the difference between federal and local travel rules? And why we would cite federal travel rules versus our own, or is that consistent with our local rules?
If you're referring to I think the amendment that might have been passed around, once, if and when this legislation goes through and we have to enact it in terms of administering the program, we'll have our team work on reviewing what the federal travel regulations are. But my assumption is that per diem rates, the federal level will be used.
Higher?
I'm sorry?
Higher or lower?
No, just the federal, whatever the GSA federal per diem rates would be, and I guess similar travel regulations that that they would use. I don't know exactly this. I haven't looked at them to compare what the local travel regulations are versus the federal, but my assumption is at least, per diem rates are published, and that's what the government of Guam uses for lodging and meals.
Right. So I'm trying to figure out what is the difference between just following the regular government of Guam rules or these, as it's stated in this potential amendment. You're not able to tell us right now. What about, no, Cabana, Mr. Cabana?
No, ma'am, I won't be able to give that answer.
All right. And I just wanted to verify with University of Guam, when you say you charge $1,000 per day for events at the field house, is that, but then you said you charge DOE $5,000 a pop. Do you mean DOE's charge $5,000 per graduation?
Yes.
Why not the $1,000 per day like the other events?
Because no one would pay $5,000 for a one-day athletic event. The $1,000 is about the top of the price point. There is a fee schedule of how we charge, which was in place before I got here. That was passed by the Board of Trustees, and that's what I based most of the prices on. But there was no such thing as an athletic price list included with that. So when I arrived, I came up with an athletic price list. There was no price list for renting our outdoor facilities, so I came up with those prices. But they tend to be lower than a graduation. For a basketball tournament or a volleyball tournament, we set up the nets or the baskets. They come in, they do their thing, and they're out. For a graduation, there's a lot of setup, and every graduation is a little bit different. So we have to do a lot of different setup type things for that.
All right, thank you. I just know that from experience that the schools have a very hard time. They ask the students to raise money for
excuse me,
to have
Senator,
their own graduation.
Senator, we can finish up the question.
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to note, adding or improving the facilities at University of Guam, I mean, I think it's obvious that, and it only costs $200,000 to bring this up to this level that we would be allowed to bring FIBA in, and it's a great event, potentially a great investment. I think, I still have questions on the other things, the why we're changing the rates for the travel, why we are covering the travel costs do seem quite high, I have to say, well, it's just things that I guess we're going to have to consider as a body. And, so we're making a $200,000 investment for facilities. And I just want to know, I just want to make sure that the government gets its value, right? And so if the event is successful do you have an estimate of how many people you are expecting to come from off-island for this event?
Oh, off-island? We're not giving those numbers, but in speaking with the other federations, their experiences, they do have fan base also accompanying the team. But we don't make any arrangements, so they're on their own trying to make those arrangements. Yeah, so it's expected and it's normal, but we're not given any projections. I guess we'll track in the future what the cheering section looks like for our inbound teams.
What about team-wise? How many are you expecting for official participation?
Yeah, from FIBA, I think it was 8 to 10 FIBA officials. For the opposing teams, they vary, like I said, at least 30 packs up to what we've seen with Australia at 40, 50 packs per team in the past. All based on their means, I'm sure, on their means of travel and their funding. So, yeah. There's also international media also making preparations to come, of which we have to provide them space to do their job.
What about 10 teams, did you say? Or?
No, for the FIBA qualifiers, there'll be 3 home games, so total 3 events. For the future youth tournament, I think it was 14 teams. It was because it's boys and girls,
All
so
right.
that's a much bigger group.
All right, thank you all for your cooperation and answering all the questions, and thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi. Senator Kelly Marsh-Taitano.
Hafide, and I have just a few more questions. I think most topics have been covered pretty thoroughly. So in noting, going through the budget, there are 20 packs that are going to be going to these away games, and there are 12 roster players, 2 alternate players, and so forth, coach, assistant coaches. So of those 8 that are coming from off-island, how many of those are alternate and how many of those are roster players?
Almost all of them, yeah. All of them are roster players. Maybe at most one might be an alternate because he's the best qualified player, but not confirmed on the roster. So he would be, in case of injury or sickness in late minutes, we have a backup player. And I try to look at fielding the roster of the best qualified players. So it's not just, oh, he's conveniently located right here, but there may be a alternate player that needs to return to Guam to fill that position.
So in your estimation, 7 of the ones off island are maybe roster
Most
players?
likely, yes. Most likely.
And so does that mean that there are basically 5 roster players that are here on island that will be going?
That's projected right now. Remember, the roster can also change from one game to another, and definitely from one window to another as players come and go. The core will be pretty similar, and we usually have about half the team. I mean, they're practicing right now as we speak with other alternate players. So they're all Guam players to me, and it's just a matter of who suits up for that particular game. But your numbers are about right, that it's about half the team that live and reside and work a day job and don't play for a living, and they're living on Guam.
Right,
Yes.
right. And so perhaps you could provide some detail as to how a team of 12 practices on a regular basis and performs well as a team if more than half of them are coming from off island. So if you could explain that it would be helpful for us to think about that.
Not an easy task. It's something that is not only independent to our situation. However, as we advance in the sport and we deal with other nations, Australia, for instance, even though they're all from Australia, you're talking about the best of a nation from one side of the country to the other, and then inclusive of players who are on the Australian national team that live abroad, that play for, many play for St. Mary's in the U.S., many play in the NBA, and maybe in Europe. So it's not unusual that you need to form a system and have a cohesive unit that isn't always together. But when it's time to represent your country, you have preparation days to get them together and try to get everyone on the same page so that you can do the best you can. A lot of these countries have also been doing this for years after years, so they're very familiar. I'd say we're somewhat familiar because we have the guys meeting at least once a year whenever we have a big competition, like we did in July when we got the gold medal in Samoa for the Pacific Games. So we just played together, but then we haven't been practicing together every night, but we're ready to come together again in a couple weeks and hopefully win another set of games.
So when they come here for the home games, or they, I'm presuming that they're going to meet people in Australia, they're just going to fly from where they're located. How much time do you allot for practice time together? Do they come out a week before the game and then you have that week of time to practice together?
Different timing again, depending on situation. So I would say the answer is as much as possible. And it's very intense as it gets closer to the competition, where 2 or 3 times a day on the court, watching film. It's an intense situation that I guess you get what you ask for. If you want to compete at this level, you need to prepare and really dedicate yourself. And so I give the athletes a lot of credit because they pull together and really do all the work prior to the game. The game is just, that's the end result. So I hope that answers that question.
Hungen, and you were explaining a bit before the 90,000 for New Zealand and Australia and how this basically works better for us, but still all in all it is 90,000 for that leg of the journey. Is it higher in cost because it's farther away? Is that the initial higher cost of the 60,000?
As we know, it's expensive to travel from Guam anywhere almost. All the athletes who represented Guam last year at the Pacific Games will testify. I heard, sharing costs with other athletes anywhere from $2,500 to $3,000 just to go to Samoa and return to Guam and make that investment. In order to go to New Zealand, it's pretty close. But then also from there to make another trip over to Australia and then back, I think the rough estimate was about 3,000. I don't think that's going to be far off. Times 20, that's 60,000. Hotel accommodations, ground transportation, and some supplies while we're traveling. We obviously want to be somewhat comfortable, but be prudent as well about making sure we have enough budget for not only that trip, but the other expenses. So that's kind of what we estimate, and it's not far off. We just experienced a trip to that part of the world 6 months ago, so it's pretty familiar.
I had done some of the calculations, and it seems like the meal cost that you're estimating, you're keeping it at a very reasonable rate. So, but it is something for us to consider when we're looking at the big picture, 90,000 for 20 people. But that will cover about 2 weeks of time. Is that your predicted
Probably,
amount of time?
that would be the most.
Or a little bit,
like you
around
said,
2 weeks?
That would include, you asked the question about getting together prior, and that's kind of a moving target. So there's the competition dates, but getting together a little bit prior to competition is the key, like you just mentioned. So I think that's a fair estimate, 2 weeks.
So just Mazi, and that helped cleared up that portion. So my last question is, what are we're talking about here 2020 and 21, and it's exciting. My father was, he inherited it from his father, who was a basketball coach. My father was named after a basketball player. He passed away watching sports. He was a full lover of sports. Yeah. One of the biggest things to him when I lived in Australia is I lived in the same town and stood next to at the time the best female basketball player in the world. Wow. And he didn't care about the rest of my town. It's just that it was the hometown of her. Meant everything to him. But with all of that, so we are very excited about the 2020-21, the accomplishments of how the national team has gone. I think Guam, across many, many boards, has so much to be proud of. We excel in so many ways for our population, our size. But, so this is just looking at 2 years. Have you begun discussion, and maybe it's a bit unfair, you're still trying to get through 2020 and 2021, but have you had some discussions about long-term planning beyond 2021?
We absolutely have. It's overwhelming almost, because if you ask us, does this end? We hope not. We hope we do well. We hope to represent well, and win or lose, we will represent well. But if we win, we will advance. We will be given more opportunities, and with that comes a lot more work and resources. Like you said, we have to cross one bridge at a time, and this qualification window of home and away games is the biggest thing we've ever encountered, and with your support we can successfully host these games and travel to compete, and hopefully do well enough. But we know that this will set up the future. This was a dream, if you asked me if this was going to happen when I was a kid. Guam wasn't having these kind of conversations in the world of sports. We were looking up to the bigger countries and saying, well, we're just not big enough, we're just not organized enough, but we're making waves. So I hope this is just the beginning, and we'll have more work in the future with your help.
Situus Masi to everybody here. I know you guys have put in a lot of long hours, and Situus Masi, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Vice Speaker Nelson, any further questions?
No, Madam Chair. But if we are done with the questioning period, I'd like to make a motion that we release the panel.
Yes. Yes, I was going to do that. Thank you. So we've exhausted the second round of questioning, and I would like to thank everybody here who stuck it out with us tonight, and thank you for answering our questions. And this would definitely inform the bill, the debate on the bill. Situus Masi, everybody. Thank you. Good night. Thank you. Thank you. At this time, I would like to call a recess till 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you.